What's up YouTube? It's your girl Yoga by Biola here with the YouTube video. I wonder if I'm gonna ever get tired of that opening. I might change it eventually. But as you can see from the title of today's video, we're going to be chatting a little bit about how I got into yoga. One of the main questions I get asked is, how did I get into yoga? It's not the prettiest story, but I'm happy to share it with you. So where do I begin? The short answer is that I was recommended to yoga from my roommate at the time when I was in college. And I started in 2008, and she recommended that I try it. She said that it was something I would like. I would like the cardiovascular burn. I would like the athletic portion of it because I do have kind of an athletic background and I do like to train. I also had gotten into a car accident some months before that kind of exacerbated my back pain. I do have scoliosis, and so that accident did worsen some of the discomfort I was feeling in my mid-back. Now, that was her recommendation. One of the reasons why I went for myself beyond her recommendation is because I really needed something to help me combat some of the major issues I was dealing with at the time. I was utilizing a lot of drugs. I've always had a very curious mindset, and younger and up until not too long ago, I dealt with some really deep-seated insecurities growing up. My family's originally from Nigeria. I'm first-generation Nigerian American, and I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. When I was in Atlanta, some sexual traumas and things that kind of exacerbated themselves. As I got older, I really took those on. And I also just was a very awkward child when I was younger. I was the middle child. I was really awkward. I was also very unhappy and depressed, like most children. Like my sisters were really vibrant, especially my younger sister. But I was always very awkward and uncomfortable in my own skin and my body, and just always kind of moody as a child. Even as a really young child, I really suffered from like depression. We moved to Washington State when I was around 7 or 8 years old. That was exacerbated. We had a really close Nigerian family and culture that I grew up in. So when we moved to Washington State, not having that, and also coming to a state that was predominantly white, I really struggled. I hung around with my little sister and her friends for a long time. And when we moved to Washington State, it was really difficult for me to once again extend and create friendships of my own. I was really badly bullied. I had to transfer to another high school because the bullying was so bad. That led me to want to really fit in with a lot of groups that did not have my best interests in heart. I was also like very much a people pleaser. I was also incredibly curious, and I was also dealing with a lot of like discomfort and trauma within my body, and really not liking my body and not liking who I was. Being a darker skinned girl too in Washington was really difficult for me. I started really experimenting with drugs fairly young, just things that I could find in the house, and then that kind of exacerbated itself once my high school year, and I graduated, and I really started to experiment with more heavier drugs. And at the time I thought it was just play, me experimenting. I didn't think that any of these drugs had any control over me, but there was a particular substance that was very strong, that gave me this invincible feeling and confidence that I wanted to feel for so much of my life, that to me the logical answer was to just keep using this drug to function. When I started to notice it was really kind of having control on me, like I was needing to use it constantly, and I would experience like slight withdrawals and stuff if I didn't have it. That got really scary for me. Or one particular instance where I did a lot of this substance and I had to actually drive myself to the hospital, and that really scared me. When my roommate at the time made that recommendation, I was just kind of willing to try anything. I had done my own research about yoga and I tried it, and I did love it. I did love the cardiovascular push and the athletics behind it, but it quickly became something very different for me. I've always, since I was a child, I've always had a relationship with spirit. There's a lot of people who relate to this. If you're very much an introvert and a recluse, at a young age, you have those awkward mannerisms. So I'd find myself speaking to Source and speaking to God all of the time and wanting to have an intrinsic relationship with God at a young age because I was spending so much time by myself and in my head a lot. I was looking to kind of break free of like utilizing these substances to feel strong and confident, and I needed to see a glimpse of myself without it, just to know that I could. Yoga didn't like reveal some incredible path to me. What it actually did, those first few classes, it made me sweat and it made me feel physically strong, which helped me feel physically confident. And so I kept going to feed that egoic part of my personality, which was so dependent on how I looked. What started to happen was I started to actually notice my self-talk. So when I started practicing, I started with Bikram yoga, as so many individuals did, I'm sure, because at that time Bikram yoga was very, very popular. And Bikram himself has gone through so many lawsuits and very controversial issues with how he was practicing and how he was manipulating his seat of power. At the same time, I'm so thankful for that practice because it helped reveal me to me. And I had blinders on in terms of my internal self and who I was and what I was speaking to myself and what I actually believed about myself, and as a result what I was projecting out into the world. And the practice, once it started to break through the physical, it quickly started to show me actually what I believed about myself. And I became so obsessed with practicing because at that time I didn't really have a lot of structure in my life, and I also had a really sour taste in my mouth with discipline because I was the trouble child. I was the one that needed the most discipline. So the practice gave me structure and reacquainted me with discipline that I myself could begin to define. It really began to help me see internally what I believed about myself, which was fairly negative. I really didn't have any esteem about myself or love towards myself. Every single attribute about myself I did not like, and I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't cognizant of that until the practice started to reveal that to me. In my practice, when we're in Shavasana, or even through the practice, it was a moving meditation. I was sitting with all these heavy things, and then after I would just sit with, like, without a physical asana practice, and I would just sit with the heaviest things. I would use my breath to like tell me and lead me where I felt it the most, where it was in my heart, or it was in my chest, or it was in my throat. And then I would just sit with it, and I would be guided to like understand where it came from, and I would be able to begin to dissolve its power, and from there replace it with something that was a more empowering belief. So it wasn't like an affirmation I was sticking on top, but I was actually doing the work to go to the place where the heaviness was and alchemize it or transmute it and replace it with a new belief that I actually had space to hold, because I had alchemized the old crap that was there, that was taking up so much space. Next thing I know, it was 2014, 2013, and I was considering becoming an instructor. I had never wanted to be a yoga instructor. It never appealed to me because my practice was so freaking personal. It was so personal. So many things changed from 2008 to 2014 in terms of the people I was hanging out with, in terms of my interests. I just like simplified my life. It was almost like I started to emerge. So in 2014, I took my first 200-hour certification here in Seattle, Washington, and then I want to say in, what was that, 2018? I took my second 200-hour. My practice and my teaching utilizes a lot of trauma healing because of the trauma that I was really focused on alchemizing, and utilizing the yogic philosophy, the sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, all of these different types of philosophies and practices, to apply those to our lives, to begin to alchemize it. At that time, I started to find Christ, and I don't normally tell people that I'm a Christian. I did grow up Muslim. My family, as a predominant region of Nigeria is Muslim. Ultimately, all paths I feel like are directing us to the same source. But when I did find yoga, a little bit after that, I did find God, and I did find Christ consciousness and the teachings of Christ consciousness in a way that was not dogmatic at all, in a way that acknowledged all of the spiritual notions that I've come to believe. I always like to encourage folks to find that journey, whether it's yoga, whether it's something else, but be intuitive and mindful and listen and begin to respond to that call when it comes, because it's going to give you the opportunity to emerge and come through as yourself. And I feel like that is liberation, to really be able to be in this body, this physical body, and emerge as your spiritual self, because it's the epitome of matured love. Hope you all have enjoyed this very raw and emotional video. If you have any comments, you can feel free to put them down below. Let me know what your experience was and how you got into yoga, and also if you're not into yoga yet, what is even piquing your interest, because you obviously have an interest to be watching this video. Utilizing that as a place to start. And don't forget to like this video, hit that subscribe button to join the family, and I'll see y'all right back here with a new video very soon.